And I noticed that all of our organizations, large organizations, really resist change. And I use that analogy of the immune system. And this is a fundamental structural issue. It's not that big, large companies are bad. It's just that they're all built to withstand risk and withstand change. As we finished that first summer, we had a visit from the dean of one of the largest business schools in the world, and maybe the best one. And he came along and he had like a bunch of newspapers with articles about SU circled, and he put them down and he said, look, what are you doing here? There's about $2 million worth of PR here. I'm the best business school in the world. I can't buy an article in a newspaper. So we tried to explain the model. And after a few minutes, he's totally puzzled look in his eyes. He's trying to understand it. And he said, how big is your team? And we looked around the table, and there was like 5 of us. And I said, well, that's it. And his mind broke. He couldn't conceive. He said, my personal staff at my office is 12 people. And over the next year or so, I was looking at these organizations. There's a new breed of organization structure that's creating a massive impact with a very small footprint. If you look at how we build organizations, we take a workforce or an asset, we put a legal organizational boundary around it, and we sell access, and we sell that scarcity. Right? We're operating off a scarcity model, and we're selling access to it. A beachfront hotel property, a restaurant with a great chef, etc. These new organizations, rather than trying to own this asset or workforce, are turning the model inside out and tapping into and convening value rather than trying to own it. Right? Some of these examples you'll hear a little bit from Jay Rogers at Local Motors. And look at the room nights. Does that curve look familiar after this last couple of days? It should. In 15 months, at its current pace, Airbnb will be the biggest hotelier in the world. Now, if you're Hyatt, you have 45,000 employees. You're valued less than Airbnb today. Airbnb has 160 employees. We've got a formula for what does it take to create an EXO, an exponential organization. So the first is you have all of these EXOs have a massive transformative purpose. Okay? This is not a standard mission statement. So for example, Google, organize the world's information. Right? Singularity, go impact 1 billion people. XPRIZE, go radical breakthroughs to benefit humanity. Highly aspirational. The second element of this is 5 externalities to scale. 5 kind of levers you can pull to scale your company outside your own organizational boundaries. The first is staff on demand. You don't try and own your own employees. You borrow them, rent them, get the crowd, get the community excited. Second, of course, is community and crowd, like TED is doing, or other websites, Twitter, etc. Third, algorithms. Google may be the grandfather of this, leveraging algorithms in a very heavy way to really scale or outside. Airbnb, a big chunk of their success is the algorithm by which they show you what properties are available near you with high ratings that tailor to your preferences and so on. Fourth, similar to assets on demand, staff on demand, assets on demand, right? If you have a lot of physical assets or workforce, you have to spend a lot of time managing it, controlling it, etc., much harder. If you have a flexible crowd, it's also hard to manage, but it's easier and gives you adaptability. And the fifth is engagement. What do we mean by engagement is gamification, Peter's expertise, incentive prizes. We've found that gamification is really good at keeping your community engaged. The second part of this is 5 attributes that go to the acronym IDEAS, which is how do you manage these? How do you manage these externalities, right? How do you control them, etc. Interfaces. Uber has very special interfaces by which it manages its drivers. Right? TEDx has very specific rules for how you create a TEDx event that are on very narrow rails. Second part of this is dashboards. Live metrics, right? Live analytics as to what's going on. This whole idea of dashboards is live tracking of your business on the outside and on the inside to manage employees in a hyper-growth environment. The third is, of course, experimentation. This is well known as the lean methodology, constantly testing. If your outside environment is so volatile, you constantly need to adapt your processes and continuously test your assumptions as to what's happening in the outside world. Taking risk, testing, iterating, constantly learning. Fourth, autonomy. Very decentralized mechanisms for pushing authority out to the edges so that employees, partners, vendors, suppliers can see what's happening at the edges and do it. And the fifth, of course, social. Real-time activity streams, file sharing. What we found is if you implement 4 out of those 10, you get to the 10x level. The first piece of advice for large organizations, your leadership and your board needs to be aware of this. The second is you cannot take a big traditional organization and turn it into an exponential organization. It's too radical a change. And it's a mistake we see lots of organizations trying to make. What you do is you take the disruptive change makers inside all of your organizations, and we have quite a few here in the room, I can see, and you take them to the edges of your organization and let them build them off the edges of your organization, right? Apple does this very well. They take a small team, they take them to the edge, and they go attack a totally different marketplace using their core competency of design. The third, and in the world where startups are going to be the disruptors, if you're a large organizations, you had better find those organizations and buy them, acquire them, partner with them, copy them, invest in them, do whatever, but figure out what they're doing because they will eat your lunch if otherwise. The fifth is find the data that you have in your organization and expose it to the outside world via APIs, etc. This is the partnership idea. GE looked at Quirky and that time to market, 29 days to go from an idea to a Walmart shelf, right? Kind of unbelievable. And they said, we can't compete with that. The second last one, Mark referenced this. If you've got a security team, you need to have, he calls it a red ops team, you need to have a team attack yourself to see what flaws you might have. Pay them to set up a company to disrupt you. Because either you're doing that or somebody else is. IDEO, the design firm, did this. They found that their model, their kind of intellectual property, their methodology for design was well understood enough that they're losing their advantage. They actually paid a team to go disrupt them. The result was a platform called OpenIDEO. And the last one is set up a Google X equivalent.